I am back with another speed build. So today I'm going to be building a modern Tudor home. The outside is going to be very traditional, but the inside is going to be pretty modern when it comes to it. So if you're going to stick around part 2, then you will hopefully find out what I mean by that, because it's going to be very grey, a little bit contemporary. And I'm also going to include lots of grey colours inside and concretes and woods and everything. So it's not really going to look like a Tudor home in the fact that it is very modern and it just will look like it's been renovated almost. But I did name this house Precious May's Tudor Home. And the reason is because one of my supporters, My Precious G, is a fantastic supporter of my channel. In fact, she did a piece of artwork for me not long ago. And as soon as it was done, honestly, it took my breath away. It was amazing. She's such a phenomenal artist, and I think she's an aspiring artist. She wants to be an artist eventually. And she's done some artwork of me, and she's also done some of other YouTubers. She did one of Vixella, she did one of Kaleido, Deligracy, and a few other people. So if you want to check out her channel, I'm going to leave the links below, because I would definitely recommend that you do, because her artwork's really, really good. In fact, I showed my mum the piece of artwork that she did, and my mum doesn't like much, to be quite honest. My mum doesn't like The Sims, she doesn't like the internet, she doesn't like a lot of things. And I showed it her because she was expecting me to show her one of my Sims creations, and I didn't. I showed her this piece of artwork, and her eyes just lit up, and she said, wow, that is amazing. That is really, really good, and you should frame that. And I said, I'm going to get it in my house, I'm going to frame it. And at the moment it's my phone background, so eventually I will actually hang it up on my wall, so that'll be pretty good. But anyway, this is a gift. So this is a gift for My Precious G, and her links are going to be below. But this build probably took me about 2 hours just to finish the exterior. And the reason is because I did it a really long time ago. I did it 2 months ago, and 2 months ago I was a lot slower at building than I am now. Right now, if I built this house, I could probably do it in about 30 to 40 minutes, depending on if I remembered where everything was. And I'm quite fast at building now. I could build a mansion in about 50 minutes, maybe an hour, and that's on a 50 by 50. And I'm pretty fast. So I think for this house, I think why I didn't share it sooner was probably to do with the fact that it is a little bit longer than most of my builds that I would share now, because usually I would share a build on a 40 by 30, which would be about a 10-minute video, and that would really be all it would be, because it wouldn't take me that long in the first place. What I was doing here though is I was very, very undecided on the colours. I thought I wanted to go for brown, and I had the whole build being brown, and then I completely changed my mind. What I was also doing is I was focusing a lot on the gallery photo, and the reason for that is because at that point we couldn't change the gallery photos, and I am going to do a tutorial of it. If I haven't already done one, then I will do. I don't know when I'm going to be posting this video, because if I have done one by this point, then that's fantastic, but if I haven't, then there will be one coming out pretty soon. What I was doing though is I was trying to figure out as well where I would want the doorway. I don't like the doorway completely central, so I was trying to be aware of that, and I was trying to fit things round that sort of area. And I definitely wanted curved castle bits, because when it comes to Tudor homes, I really love that. In fact, my old house that I used to live in, and I do mention quite a lot, was a Tudor home. It was a black and white Tudor home, and it did have some rounded bits. In fact, in my sister's room, and this was one of the main things that I remember about the build which I lived in, it had this settee, but it's basically where you can sit down, and it's a little bit like a small chair but without the backing of it, and it was curved round the curved area of the house. So it's a little bit difficult to explain, but it's basically a perch where you could actually sit, read your book, and you could look out the window, and it would be a curved sofa. So it's quite nice, and I remember that about my old house, and it was one of my favourite features. It also had a tree house, so that is definitely one of the reasons why I love my old house. But it had a lot of really scary features as well. It had a bookcase, and it had a secret room behind the bookcase, and it just was a little bit creepy. A lot of stuff happened there. There was a lot of history in the house. I think it was about 300 years old, and it was originally owned by spinsters, and spinsters didn't like children, and it was a little bit scary. I mean, for a child to grow up, and it had a lot of history, and I think some people had sadly passed away there, so that wasn't obviously the best environment to move in on. But I was only 7 when I lived there, so I didn't really know a lot about the house at that point in my life. But I do know that there were a lot of stories about the house from people that lived there before and also after and also during. So it was a little bit of a creepy house, but it has a lot of history, and maybe I'll save some of those stories for Halloween at some point. But anyways, what I was doing is I was putting in the ivy. I couldn't decide how much ivy I wanted. So some of it I left in, some of it I took out, and it was really just practicing. And sometimes I can go over the top with ivy. I get asked a lot, how do you ever know when enough's enough and to stop putting ivy in? And you just have to experiment, you just have to see different things. I mean, you can always take it out if you do feel like it's too much, and that's sometimes what I do. I think with this build as well, especially when I'm a little bit sidetracked, if I'm listening to music or something and I'm putting ivy in at that moment, then that is when I can get a little bit unfocused, and that's what's been happening. So what was happening here probably is I was listening to music and I was getting a bit carried away, because I like getting carried away when listening to music, and I just do it because it's relaxing and I like building. So I think a lot of it is just practicing, and it's just finding what the right amount is. And I do like a lot of ivy, so I don't think it even matters if I do go overboard. I think on some designs that I have done in the past have gone overboard. I think the ones that I have gone probably a little bit overboard on are probably Kaleido's Greek townhome and also Vic Seller's home, but I do like them both, so they are nice homes, and I don't think that I would change them in any way. I just think it's a little bit more landscaping than I would usually do, but I still like it, and I hope that you do as well. But anyway, what I was doing is I was readjusting the wallpaperings. I was still really unsure, and I was happy with the choice of changing it in the end. I was also having a lot of trouble with the inside of the build, so that is something that I have to do, I think maybe when I come to the interior, but I don't think you'll even see that, because what I did was I cleared out the walls before I even started, and that was a really long process in itself, but it was definitely needed, so I was happy with that. And then at this point, it all started to change. I don't even know what I did differently. It just changed all of a sudden, and wow, it looks really, really different. So it's starting to look like the house which I wanted it to look like. And I think at this point as well, I was thinking, do I have it in the brown colour? Because even though I like the brown colour, would it look better in a different colour? And I think that even though it didn't end up being in the brown colour, I do have another build coming up, maybe a couple of builds after this, which is going to be in a brownie colour with the brownie styled roof. And it is going to look a little bit like this, but different in the way that it is a suburban house. And it is a little bit similar to Mariana's cottage in that way, but it's going to be a bit different. So without being too similar, it's also going to be very different. But I have a lot of builds coming up, and I think probably that is why I have left off a lot of these smaller builds as well, because I've got two ginormous mansions coming up on my channel, each being completely different to one another. One is a very traditional mansion, and the other one is a more modern mansion, or at least it's going to be more of a family suburban home, but a big version. So I think they're going to be interesting builds to share when they do come out. They'll be out probably in the next couple of weeks, because I'll get them sorted as soon as possible. And I think that when they are, I think that that will be a sense of relievement from me, because I'll be thinking to myself, well, now I can go back to doing smaller builds, because I do want to have big builds on my channel and I want to make room for doing big mansions. So maybe that was a lot of the reason why I have left off some smaller builds recently, and that's why I haven't been sharing some of my older builds that I did ages ago. But what I was doing here was I was experimenting with a blue paneling colour, and I really like it actually. I didn't keep it. I ended up changing it to the traditional Windenburg brick stone colour, and I was a lot happier with how that looked. But I think that these colours are still nice, and that's why I left all this footage in, so you could see what process I went through, what I didn't use, because what I might not use might be something that you particularly like. And if you do want to change this build to a way that I had it before, then you can do that with some of these ideas. Or if you want to use some of these ideas on your own build, then you could do that as well, just with what I'm doing here. So then I started to change the roof. I wanted a darker roof, and I think that I did go with a darker roof in the end. I think that when I did start to change the roof about, and I started to find these paneling colours from the Get Together expansion pack, that's when I really started to like this build a lot more, and I started to think, actually I could do a lot more with this than I'm doing right now. And I could make this an interesting build because it could be two colours, and that I could maybe incorporate some grey in here. So this was when I really started to change it around, and this is when it's starting to look really identical to the finished product, and I think that at this point, this was when I was very happy with it. And I did like the brown features. I didn't include a lot of brown by the end, and what I did was I just included a brown door and a brown staircase. And a lot of the browns throughout the build did disappear into this grey colour, and I liked that because I thought being a brown build, it would just be too much, and I thought being grey and looking like it's been painted recently, I thought it looked very good. It looked really chic, is that the word? I can't remember what the word is for it, but it looks as if it's supposed to be this way, and it looks modern in that sense, and I like the look of it. Then what I was doing is I was changing some of these windows to blue because I thought they looked better in blue, so I did change those, and I just kept them where they were. I just changed the colour of them. Then I was round to the garden, so what I decided to do was I decided to have a side garden and also a back garden, so that it would give me a lot of space when it came to adding things like children's climbing frames, because I could add some around the sides as well, and it would just save a lot of space by doing that. So that's what I decided to do there. I was then just adding a pool to this area, and I liked the idea of that. I think that I did leave it as a rose pool, which I'm really, really keen on, and even though it would be very difficult to upkeep, I think that it really does suit this build, and it looks as if the lavender and the roses have flowed into here just naturally, and that is just how it's been. So I like the idea of that, and I love lavender personally. The build does have a lot of lavender plants in the back garden and also the front garden as well, so I like lavender. I'm actually having lavender at my wedding, so I'm looking forward to that. What I was doing here is I was making a really nice flower bush. I wanted it to be really big, so I had that in the garden. I have some people emptying bins outside my house now, so if you can hear them, that is not me. That is my neighbours. They are so incredibly noisy, and oh gosh, it frustrates me. But anyway, so what I was doing is I was adding a path, and I was also adding some flower boxes. So I added 2 at the front here. I thought having them near to the front would be really lovely, and especially as the neighbours were walking past, it would just be really nice to have the plants at the front, so that if you were practicing a gardening skill, they could just be there and you don't have to forget about them, because they're not around the back, they're not hidden like they are in a lot of my other builds. They are right at the front there, so you can see them and you can get reminded of when they actually need to be harvested, so that's quite good in that sense. Then what I was doing is I was just adding the last bits and bobs to the garden. I think I just put some trees around this area. I really like big trees, especially in Willow Creek, because Willow Creek does have a lot of big trees, and I like to blend it in with the atmosphere. I like to look around, see what else is there, and there are some really, really big ones around. They have those really bright green ones, but I like the darker ones, especially for this house. And I think as long as they're trees, as long as they're big, I think it does blend in really well, so I was happy with that. Then I was just putting a bench. I was just putting a general seating area, maybe for some neighbours, in case you didn't want the neighbours to come inside and you wanted to keep them out. But that is the end of the build, so I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you for part 2. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm going to show you the screenshots now.